Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Tonight, we're diving into a haunting tale shared by Isabel, one of our Reddit members with the username survivor_512. This story takes us back to a chilling childhood experience, and believe me, it's bound to keep you on edge. So, make sure you're ready for some spine-tingling suspense as we explore shadows in the attic. Let's get into it. Growing up, my family and I lived in a sprawling house isolated on the edge of a vast forest. The house was old, with a weathered wooden exterior and tall, narrow windows that seemed to cast elongated shadows as dusk fell. It stood in near solitude, surrounded by dense trees and with only a few distant neighbors. The isolation added a layer of eerie silence to the house, especially at night. The attic was an immense dark space that felt almost like a different world. It was accessible by a narrow, steep staircase that creaked underfoot with every step. The attic was cluttered with forgotten furniture and dusty boxes, remnants of a bygone era. My parents had always told me it was dangerous to explore up there, and I had heeded their warning until the unsettling noises began. Around midnight, when the world outside was blanketed in darkness, I would lie in bed, my mind racing as I tried to fall asleep. But the silence of the night was often broken by the sound of footsteps coming from the attic above my room. At first, the footsteps were faint and irregular, barely perceptible over the hum of the house settling into the night. However, as time went on, the sounds grew more distinct and unsettling. It was as if someone, or something, was deliberately pacing back and forth, their steps heavy and deliberate. The noises grew increasingly disruptive. The footsteps would start out faint, but would soon become a steady, rhythmic pacing. Occasionally there were dragging sounds, like furniture being moved or something heavy being pulled across the floor. Each creak of the old house seemed to amplify the sounds from above, making them seem even more ominous. One particularly distressing night, the footsteps became frantic and erratic. The pacing was replaced by a hurried march, with the steps growing louder and more intense. The sound was accompanied by a series of scraping noises, as if something was being dragged across the attic floor. The combination of the frantic pacing and the dragging noises made my heart race with terror. Unable to endure the fear any longer, I crept out of bed and made my way down the dark hallway to my parents' room. The hallway was dimly lit by a single nightlight, and the floorboards creaked with every step I took. As I approached my parents' door, I could hear the footsteps above growing louder, as if they were aware of my presence. I knocked softly at first, but the noise from the attic made it hard to hear. When there was no response, I knocked louder, my anxiety escalating with each passing second. Finally, my parents opened the door, looking groggy and concerned. I explained through trembling lips what I had heard: the footsteps, the dragging noises, and the overall sense of unease. My parents exchanged skeptical glances. They reassured me that it was probably just my imagination, or perhaps the house settling. They agreed to check my room to ease my fears. They walked with me back to my room, their footsteps echoing in the quiet house. They inspected the room thoroughly, opening the closet and checking under the bed. When my mom opened the closet, she discovered a board game sprawled out across the floor. It had been on the top shelf, and now its pieces were scattered everywhere. It was clear that the game had been pushed off the shelf deliberately, as there was no way it could have fallen by itself. My parents helped me clean up the mess and put the game back in its place. They assured me that there was nothing to be afraid of and tucked me back into bed. As soon as they left, the whispers began. They were faint but unmistakable, as if someone was trying to call my name from somewhere in the darkness. I strained to hear, but the whispers were just beyond my grasp. The shadow on the wall appeared again, moving slowly and deliberately. It looked like a distorted figure, flickering in and out of view, casting an unsettling presence in the dim light. I was paralyzed with fear. and I grabbed my pillow and blanket and went to sleep on the floor of my parents' room. The safety of their presence provided some comfort, but the fear never fully dissipated. Each night, I would lie awake, listening to the footsteps and whispers, unable to escape the pervasive sense of dread. For the next few nights, I continued to sleep on the floor of my parents' room. The sounds from the attic were relentless, and the fear became a constant companion. The whispers grew more insistent, and the shadow on the wall seemed to take on a more menacing shape. It felt like a presence was watching me, growing more intense with each passing night. One particularly disturbing night, the footsteps grew louder and more deliberate than ever before. It sounded as if someone was walking directly above me, their steps heavy and rhythmic. The noise was accompanied by a series of scraping and dragging sounds, as if something was being moved or dragged across the attic floor. The combination of the footsteps and the dragging noises created a sense of impending doom. The fear was overwhelming, and I felt paralyzed, unable to move or cry out. The shadow on the wall grew larger and more distorted, its form shifting and contorting as if it were alive. The terror was all-consuming, and I lay in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. Despite my growing fear, I eventually decided to return to my own bed. I couldn't continue to sleep on the floor of my parents' room indefinitely. Each night I lay in bed, my pulse racing as the familiar sounds began again. The footsteps and whispers returned, each night growing more insistent and unnerving. One night, the footsteps in the attic were accompanied by a strange rhythmic tapping. The noise was almost musical but distorted and jarring. It was as if someone was trying to communicate through the sounds, but the message was lost in the chaos. The shadow on the wall seemed to move with the tapping, its form shifting and contorting in the dark. The experience left me constantly on edge, unable to escape the sense of unease. The nights were filled with anxiety and dread, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. The fear became a part of my routine, and I struggled to shake the sense of paranoia that followed me. Eventually, my family decided to move away from the house. The decision was influenced by various factors, but the unsettling experiences in the attic were a significant part of it. The move was a relief, but the memories of the footsteps and whispers continued to haunt me. Even after we relocated, I couldn't escape the lingering fear of the unknown. To this day, I still don't know what caused the footsteps or the whispers in the attic. The mystery remains unresolved, and the fear of the unknown continues to linger. The experience has taught me that some things may never have an explanation, and sometimes the unknown is the most terrifying thing of all. Thank you all for joining me tonight for Isabel's eerie tale, Shadows in the Attic. A big thank you to Isabel, also known as Survivor_512, for sharing this unsettling experience with us. If you enjoyed the story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future tales. And as always, if you have your own creepy experiences to share, feel free to send them in. Until next time, stay safe and keep your lights on.